Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel and joined once again with Jeff Berkowitz from Public Affairs TV in Chicago. And Jeff, before we begin our discussion of the year past and things ahead, let's welcome everyone to 2025. And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't, when you're watching this on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe if you have not already to our channel so you can see what Jeff and I are talking about on an ongoing basis. And Jeff, we begin the new year 2025 with tragedy, as just after midnight in New Orleans, there had been what is apparently a deadly terrorist attack, although we don't really know so many of the issues that are developing. But what we do know at this time is reported by the authorities that some 10 people have been killed and apparently about 35 injured, although we don't really have a whole lot of those details at this time.
Well, what we do know is the government, our government, has decided very early on, we don't know all the details why, that this is to be investigated as a terrorist attack. And that's something they don't usually say from the get-go, but they apparently have said that this time. What we also know is that initially, often the facts are not reported accurately. And so as we tape this on January 1, about a little after 1 p.m., there's a press conference that's going on that will reveal more of the facts. And people who watch that press conference will know more than we know. But we do know this happened, and we do know the background. That is, we know about the illegal immigration that has occurred in this country. In the last 4 years, approximately 8 million or so illegal immigrants across our border. We do know there was no attempt to even enforce our borders. And we do know that was probably a major reason why Donald Trump was elected.
We do know that. And the thing is, as if Donald Trump, now president-elect, needed any additional verification that his policies and the arguments he made were accurate. We had this tragedy in New Orleans. Police have identified the suspect here as Samsoud bin Jabbar, 42 years old. He got out of the car after he plowed through the people, according to the reports we're getting, and started firing at police. He injured 2 police who are apparently going to recover from those injuries, but the suspect was shot dead. And going back to what you and I initially were going to start off with, which was certainly not a terrorist attack, but was the big story of 2024, was the presidential election. And this, again, underscores one of the main themes of Trump's campaign, is that the open border, of the policy of the open border by the Biden-Harris administration, was a national threat. And hopefully we're not going to see more of these, but of course there's no way of telling that.
And we do know that it was reported that found in the truck or whatever this suspect was driving were explosive devices. So he had plans to do much more damage than actually occurred. So thankfully he was cut short of that. We do know, or it's been reported, that ISIS or other similar materials were found in the truck. And we do know this country has spent much of the last 4 years focusing on lawfare, focusing on what I would call, and Terry, I think you would agree, kind of ridiculous lawsuits that have been going on. And while that goes on, our strategic enemies, terrorists, China, Iran, North Korea, Russia, they work together. They work together to the detriment of the United States. So it's time to start focusing on the strategic dangers from without that come to this country. It's time to start focusing on our military and strengthening it and make sure we're prepared. And it's time to make sure we do what's necessary to maintain probably the strongest asset of the United States, the strong engine that is our economy, that is the envy of the countries around the world. So those are some of the things we should start focusing on right now, January 1, as we get ready for the change in administration that will occur on January 20.
And for, again, viewers, what Jeff and I were trying to focus on here is a kind of a bridge from the past to what we might expect in 2025. And so we're starting off with a little bit of a look back, triggered in part uh, by this terrorist attack, but also, Jeff, I think you and I would agree, I think most people in journalism would agree, the big story of 2024 was the presidential election and the return of Donald Trump, despite all that lawfare you just mentioned, the return of Donald Trump coming into the White House. And let me bring up just from today's Wall Street Journal. This is January the 1st of 2025, and they bring up this editorial addressed to basically the the Democrats nationally, saying that if Mr. Biden policies were working, the American people might have given him the benefit of the doubt or even elected Mrs. Harris, but they didn't. And rather than reconsider the policies, Democrats complained that Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris had poor messaging and that Trump was better at taking advantage of the new media, which I would argue, Jeff, is the Democrats missing the point. The point is their policies were bad. Their policies were rejected by the voters, and in part, not necessarily just the border, but as we now address on January 1, in part because of the open border was one of it, and also, of course, inflation and other issues.
So that leads us positively to ask, what will the president-elect, when he becomes the president, Donald Trump, on January 20, what will he focus on? So when we think about it, we've been weak in foreign policy for the last 4 years, starting with the Afghanistan withdrawal, which the Democrats point to and say, yes, that was a part of something that Donald Trump had put in motion. Yes, he had. But people expect our leaders to exercise judgment. And so as policies move along, and as we look at that, and as the military advises, as we know they did, say, maybe you want to have 3,500 troops left there. Maybe you don't. Things are not looking so good for this government being as stable as you might want. So leave some troops, leave an airbase, keep control of the airbase, do some things like that. Well, we know Joe Biden said, the hell with that. We're getting the hell out of there. We need judgment, Terry. We'll talk about judgment as we get into the show, the importance of that as we enter a new age. But we expect our leaders to be nimble, to be thoughtful, and be able to adapt to facts. We didn't do that in Afghanistan. We didn't do that with Russia and Ukraine. We didn't do that in our vacillation and support for Israel. Because look at what happened, jumping ahead. Israel on its own, with our arms, notwithstanding that Biden every other month, week, day was deciding maybe we want to slow this down, maybe we want to attack Israel.
And Jeff,
So
as we
Israel went ahead. Just let me finish. Israel went ahead and basically diminished the threat of Iran to the United States. Iran is not the factor we thought it was. We showed that with some U.S. support, Israel showed them to be a very weak link. And we see that Russia is very weak, losing 600,000 troops as it sought to expand its borders.
Let me insert here. I just got breaking news that the police, going back to the New Orleans story, again, we're taping this as the press conference is going on. Authorities are now saying that the suspect in that attack apparently did not act alone. So that's another thing I wanted to insert. That just broke as you were speaking. So yes, and so look, where we are, we had the presidential election. The Democrats still have not caught up. And this underscores the threat, the national security threat at the border. As Trump said, we know we had the inflation. So many times the Democrats were saying, what are you talking about on the economy? We've got a great economy. You people, you just don't know how good you have it. And the fact is that there was a bifurcated economy where the stocks were going up, but the stock market also looks ahead. And stocks may have been going up. There were areas of the economy, especially in high tech, and we'll get to some of that, that were moving forward. But the blue collar worker, the guys going to work and trying to just get by, were torn between the gasoline they had to put in their car and the price of food at the grocery store. That inflation that hit the average American family and continues to be a problem is where the Democrats were missing the boat, I would argue, on the economy. They were looking at the headlines and not looking at what was really going on with the voters and their struggle to get by.
Well, when you go from about 1.4% inflation, which was the case when the Democrats came in, when Biden came in 2021, to 9% inflation. That's a tremendous shock to the economy. And that doesn't go away in one day or 1 week and 1 month. So as inflation comes down, as it did, to currently less than, let's say, 3%, some of that higher price level stays there. And that's what people felt, and that felt so much when they went to the polls in November of last year. So this is the kind of thing that the Democratic Party has missed. And that the source of that inflation was the tremendous spending that continued to occur, the trillions that was unnecessary as we came out of COVID. And so this was inflation that was blamed rightly on the Biden administration, the illegal immigration and the open borders blamed rightly on Biden administration, the criminality that came from that, and in significant part,
It,
but not
it was
total,
a
from that.
It was a series of issues, and the Wall Street Journal, I can't reproduce the entire Wall Street Journal editorial, but they mentioned that the Democrats were just not listening to the electorate. I encapsulated in the blurb we already had. But what we also saw, as you said, is that the Democrats, look, the Biden administration throughout their term were saying the border is secure, while millions of illegal immigrants were coming across the border, while fentanyl was killing over 100,000 Americans a year. And it was as if there was just a massive disconnect from what the policies were of the Biden administration and what the voters were seeing with their own eyes. And we see, including here, Illinois and Chicago, the cost of that illegal immigration on these cities across America was massive. And those millions of dollars, and we saw it in Chicago, you know more than I, where we had voters in Chicago just recently before the Chicago Board of Aldermen talking about how much money was being spent on these illegal immigrants. And meanwhile, money was not going to so many of the neighborhoods that needed help on the south side, on the west side. And these typical Democrat voters, African American voters, were wearing in the chambers red shirts that said, "Turn Chicago red," meaning go from voting Democrat to Republican. You and I don't know where that'll go. Maybe you have a better feeling than I would on it. But these were all part of the 2024 election and some of the fissures that we see happening in the political establishment and how those might exacerbate divisions in 2025.
The trust that is so important in America that they have in their leaders was lost. They could no longer depend on their Homeland Security Secretary to be truthful to them when they saw him say repeatedly that our border is closed. We don't have an open border, as video would show people walking across the border, our southern border. And we knew there were problems in our northern border. And we have a president-elect who was not president yet, but he had leaders from Canada, leaders from Mexico communicating with him, coming to see him from other countries to deal with what do we do to strengthen our borders on the south and in the north. And do we need to talk about, as he did, tariffs, not desiring to have tariffs, but can tariffs be a part of the negotiation? And so if you're not going to have those tariffs, can you do more to integrate our economies, which we already are strongly integrated with Canada and with Mexico, to strengthen North America, and America is a part of that? And can we think about the dangers that come from China spending billions, maybe trillions, on strengthening their ties to South America and the dangers that will arise from that? And this is what America wanted. They didn't want lawfare. They thought these lawsuits were not great. The Biden administration kept plowing ahead with special counsel as they were flying people into flying illegal immigrants into the interior of our country.
And as you already said, as they're telling us the border's secured, they're flying immigrants in. It was just
secretly
in the middle of the night.
If you watch if you watched Fox, you saw the reports. If you watched CNN and you watched MSNBC, you didn't. And if you watched Fox, you saw the deterioration of Joe Biden over time and his mental acuity. And if you watch, and Fox was reporting and showing the truth, and MSNBC and CNN were
And
not.
ABC
And we
and
had,
NBC and CBS. And by
and
the
now
way,
we have,
Jeff, when we look ahead, I would argue that one of the major losers was the network news organizations. These people have been press spokesmen for the Democratic Party, for the Biden administration. They ignored the reality of what was happening at the border. They didn't assign a reporter there. They ignored the reality of what was happening in the economy, and they put a lipstick on the proverbial pig in covering up the failures of the Biden administration. And these networks were happy to say Joe Biden is at the top of his game. He's never been sharper. How sharp he is in cabinet meetings, actually that he didn't hold. And this was, I think, the American people have rejected not only the Democratic Party. I think increasingly what we see happening as we look forward is a rejection of the old news media, the old gatekeepers, and those are the three major networks. One wonders at what point are these networks going to pull the plug on some of these network news shows that are a throwback to the Walter Cronkite era, or are they going to start hiring some reporters and have some more political balance within there? Because I think the way the news is going now, the audience is leaving in droves those network shows.
well, the reporting that's been amiss in the legacy media is getting exposed daily. Our public school system across the country is in major trouble because we have teachers unions across the country that have enormous power, that make trades with our legislatures in the various states, and they transfer power to more power to the teachers unions, and the legislators get contributions to do that transfer of power. And this is sort of a symbiotic relationship that exists that has to stop. There's a difference between public sector unions and private sector or trade unions. And one, FDR noticed the difference himself long ago and these sweetheart deals that occurred. And it's come home to roost through COVID when we had kids staying home unnecessarily because they were not in danger and parents were there at home and people were confined to see what was going on in their schools and they didn't like it and they don't like it. And this is the sleeping time bomb that's existing within the Democratic Party. Either it wakes up soon and realizes that people are onto this, that they have sold people out. We have 40% or so of our kids across the country not reading at grade level, not reading. And if you can't, we're talking, Terry, as you've alluded to, technology changing, people being replaced by robots. People may say, well, Jeff, they don't have to read because they're getting the news read to them. No, but they have to think. The
Let
most
me, I do
important
want to
thing
get
we
to
have.
technology, but while you're talking, let me bring up on the issue, and you could tell me, because this is why, I mean, what you have your fingers on the pulse of Chicago more than I. But in talking about the failure of the school system, Chicago is getting all this money, as you and I have talked before, $30,000 a year per pupil. But look at the impact on people living there. Chicago property taxes rising 3.5 times faster than inflation over the last decade. And not only that, we look at the impact. Chicago median home value growth is the worst among the nation's biggest cities. And so when we talk about the issues that are impacting the Democratic Party, the balance of power, and everyone knows who follows Illinois politics, Chicago rules the roost, and everyone there has been safely voted back in with the Democrats controlling the city for, what, close to 90 years. In your estimation, are these realities where people are moving out. They're moving out of the state. They're moving out of Chicago into other counties. What impact is this going to have, do you think, going forward? And is there any potential for the Republicans to make gains in the city of Chicago?
Well, there's potential. It's going to be most difficult in the city of Chicago, but there certainly is potential in the state of Illinois. We have a governor who parades around the country saying he could be president of the United States because of how well he's done in Illinois. He's been there 6 years. There's been nothing. He never talks about what I have talked about just now, their educational system. The fact that only 1 out of every 3 kids reads across the state of Illinois. It's worse in Chicago, but it's across the state of Illinois a major problem. Never addresses that issue. You have the ridiculous thing where you have a superintendent in Peoria who's awarded, like, I don't know, superintendent of the year, and the Pritzker is nominating her for being superintendent of the nation, essentially. And what has she done? And in Peoria, you have blacks often reading at 6%, 8%, 10%. That's the percentage of blacks who read, and Hispanics similar levels. And you reward that superintendent who's been there for 10 years. Our system is rotted throughout, the public school system, and what will save it is the free market. We've seen 31 states, not Illinois, but 31 states have some form of school choice. A dozen of those states, a dozen have what we call universal choice. That means irrespective of income, people are able to receive from their state government a portion of what would otherwise be spent on the public schools. They can take and spend it of the school of their choice. And those private and charter schools and other alternatives are outperforming the public schools that I've talked about now.
Yeah, the governor, of course, is all against school choice. Let me ask you, on Chicago, is the budget of Chicago still hemorrhaging red ink, or have they balanced their budget?
Well, in a false way, they talked about balancing it, but there is hopeful sign, even in the extremely progressive city council of 50 members. The mayor, Brandon Johnson, sought to impose a significant property tax increase, and he was defeated 50-0. Even the communists in our city council, our Marxists, voted against that.
And so people, let me insert for the audience here, from our friends from our points, City of Chicago revenues have ballooned 55% versus going back to 2019. So it's
Right.
not like the taxpayers aren't doing their job. You often hear we need to raise taxes as if the taxpayers just aren't paying their share. Well, they are paying their share. They're paying a lot more. And when you talk about, as we did earlier, the working class trying to get ahead and falling behind, hey, you know what? One of the reasons isn't just the inflation, it's the ever-increasing cost of government. And Trump wants to address that in 2025 and forward with this new department, DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. So this is going to be one of the first real attempts in 2025 to reel in, at the federal level at least, the cost of government, probably since the Reagan years, when I'm dropping the name of the commission we had back then, but since the Reagan years.
I think the Grace Commission.
The Grace Commission, right, like William Grace. So we'll have to see. That's one of the real things that's going to be happening.
So bringing people back to the here and now in this country. We're talking on January 1. That's when they're taping this program. January 3, we'll learn more about I think we'll learn who the new speaker. We'll learn more that Mike Johnson will remain the Speaker of the U.S. House. And once that's time,
if he will,
we'll
right?
We'll learn if he will. My prediction is he will. Donald Trump has come out strongly and endorsed him. That hasn't happened in the last go-around. And now you have a president-elect who's going to kick some butt, I think. If there are Republicans who want to go their own way and spend several days or several weeks discussing that, I don't think that's going to happen here.
Yeah, one of the things that Trump, I expect Trump to have he had a powerful first term, but he stumbled many times on some of those appointments. Now that he spent 4 years before as president, he has a better lay of the land, and he wants to come out of the gate like a horse on a racetrack. He's ready to go and move fast because he knows he only has 2 years before the next midterm elections where he could possibly, very possibly, lose control of the House. The Republicans only have a 4-seat majority right now. And as you were talking about, this January 3rd election for House Speaker, there at this time are 5 House Republicans who are not supporting Mike Johnson. If they hold out, Johnson will not be elected the Speaker. That means that the House of Representatives cannot certify the election on January 6th of Trump being the elector or elected president in the November election. And that means that the whole Trump agenda is going to be held up for who knows how long if those 5 House Republicans do not bend to the Trump effect.
Well, I would imagine that even as we tape this show, Donald Trump and his aides are contacting these folks or having conversations with them either in person or on the phone. I imagine some deals are being struck. Those folks very much want to, and it's appropriate, restrain federal spending. So I suspect that some deals will be made, and basically, and this is the kind of horse trading that is healthy and a part of our legislative process. If those folks get some assurances of what they want, Mike Johnson stays Speaker, then you proceed to January 6th. The Senate and the House elections and the president are certified on January 6th, and things go ahead as scheduled on January 20th. And when that happens, then you expect that Donald Trump he'll soon try to have his foreign policy team in place. The Secretary of Defense.
And we'll have to see about that because the Senate can go ahead and confirm. They don't have to wait for confirmation of those. But Jeff, you and I are also trying in this episode to take a little bit of a look forward, and some of the stories that are really big that are not covered by mainstream media, they are available in any number of places on YouTube. And one of the big issues is going to be robotics. There are a lot of people are looking at this explosion of different technologies going forward. Robotics is going to be one of the big stories, not only in 2025, but going forward. And that is going to have severe political implications as these robots can be replacing the jobs that require physical labor of humans. Another thing that people have on their own laptops now, if they're using Microsoft, is AI, artificial intelligence. That sounds highfalutin, and it is to some extent, but this is an example of what we see in Copilot, where you can ask, what does the microbiome health mean, and how does it play a role in your health? You can check that out, and you get an immediate answer. You also, as I did just before we went on the air, ask, how many casualties were there in New Orleans on this terrorist attack? And it spits out the details immediately and can update people. So it begs the question, these technologies, of the impact on such things as the news business, as so many jobs where people may be cutting grass or stacking boxes on a UPS truck. What the future is going to hold from this technology, you and I can't predict. Many people can't. But what we can predict is going to have a lot of political implications. And of course, you and I are going to be covering not only that, but we're certainly going to be covering these changes that are going to be coming up in January with the election of Mike Johnson or someone else, and all the other integration of the new Trump administration going forward.
So the important test of this administration will be, can they quickly deal with, at least have a strong start on sealing the border, dealing with the illegal immigration, dealing with the easiest cases to deal with on deporting. That would be those who have been convicted of crimes elsewhere or here. Can they deal importantly with dereg or changes in energy production, liquefied natural gas, oil and gas? Can they go to court where necessary to see?
What I can say is, one, we're out of time, but two, you and I are going to be following all these issues, and the American people will want to pay attention. Folks, give us your thoughts. Jeff and I want to wish you a happy new year, and we'll be in touch. Hopefully you will as well. Jeff, For now, take care. Enjoy the rest of your January 1st.